Hey guys, welcome to Module 3. And I just want to discuss sort of where we've been and where we're going and how we're going to apply some of the information that we've already learned to this week's Milestone 1 assignment. All right. First of all, I do encourage you to look at my short module lecture because it'll tell you what I'm expecting regarding your responses to the critical elements. And many of your responses, you've already done much of the work either in your previous discussion assignments or in your short papers. So what we're just trying to do this week is put all these puzzle pieces together as we work on our Milestone 1 assignment, okay? So in Module 1, we learned about federal courts, their structure, their primary roles of each of the tiers within the court system, and then you learn about federal judges. So you have an idea now as to how federal judges are selected and appointed and nominated, and all the things that go with someone becoming a federal judge. Now in Module 2, you learned about state court structure. So if anything, you learn that most of the states are a little bit different in how their states are structured, their court system, and then also what is required to be a judge within your home state. So in some cases, you might have a justice of the peace or a city court. And some of those judges may not have to have much in terms of legal experience, well as typically judges who are overseeing trial courts of general jurisdiction. Those are your more serious cases, more like homicide, rapes, and those type of things, and more significant civil cases in which you're seeking several $100,000 of damages. Those tend to require a legal background, a law degree, and so forth. All right, so we've learned about those. So now we're going to start putting some of these pieces together this week. And so I'm going to be looking at the Module 1 or the Milestone 1 assignment, so I make sure I sort of touch upon these things. But we're looking at the hierarchical structure, so we already know about that. And you're going to be looking at each of the tiers within those structures and what are the primary roles. So for example, we learned that the primary role for the federal district courts is to serve as the trial courts, all right, in the federal system. Whereas in the state court system, you have trial courts of general jurisdiction, which tend to be the trial courts that handle the more serious cases, felonies, for example, and the more serious civil litigation. And that is their primary purpose. Their primary purpose is to handle the more serious crimes versus trial courts of limited jurisdiction, which tend to handle infractions and misdemeanors. And infractions and misdemeanors are the significant, there are a lot more cases that are heard in trial courts of limited jurisdiction than trial courts of general jurisdiction because most crimes and offenses tend to be low level. Traffic tickets, shoplifting, minor drug possession, those type of things tend to be handled as misdemeanors. All right, so we've learned about those. You're also going to be looking at some of the differences between federal and state courts. What are some of the primary differences? And the primary difference, of course, lies with jurisdiction. We also learned about how they're different in terms of their structure, the types of cases that they hear, and those type of things. So we've already learned then some of the key differences between the two, or you've researched, okay? You've looked at federal courts, state courts, so now you're asked, what are some of the primary differences? And again, the primary difference lies with jurisdiction, but there are other differences. Caseload, like I said, types of cases, how the judges reach the bench. Those are some of the other differences unique to federal courts. And then you're going to be looking at sort of why levels are important. Why do we have federal courts and state courts? We have a dual court system. Why is that? So take a look at my short module lecture because I talk about that specifically so you have an idea. And there's also a handout that I have in the announcement for this week that you will see to help you try to better understand how it is and why it is that we have these different levels. All right. You're going to be learning about subject matter jurisdiction this week in your discussion assignment because you're going to be looking at specialized courts or subject matter courts. So you're going to be learning about subject matter jurisdiction, what it is, and how it benefits the legal system. Again, I talk about this in the short module lecture, so make sure you take a look at that. Some of the key things we've talked about previously are venue and jurisdiction, and now we're going to be applying those concepts to our scenario. So remember, our scenario involves a bank robbery in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is not a state, it's the District of Columbia. A little bit different. So in a previous discussion assignment, I sort of described why the D.C. courts are a little bit different than federal courts. But the big issue here in terms of jurisdiction and venue is that our scenario involves a bank robbery. And bank robbery is a federal crime. And federal crimes supersede state crimes, which means that federal courts will have jurisdiction if the authorities elect to adopt the case. So for purposes of our scenario, our bank robbery that occurs in Washington, D.C. is going to be handled as a federal crime because it violates federal statute. And in our previous announcements, I've given you the specific statute that outlines and describes bank robberies, all right? And that's the basis for jurisdiction. That's what gives federal courts the jurisdiction, is the fact that we have a bank robbery that violates federal law, right? So that's going to be important. Then we're going to talk about venue in the milestone one. How is venue determined? All right, so we've learned about that. I've offered some videos in terms of how jurisdiction or venue might be established in terms of civil cases, but in criminal cases, it's pretty straightforward. Venue for criminal cases is where the crime occurred, right? So crime occurred in Washington, D.C. It's a federal crime. The proper venue would be the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, right? And then finally, you're going to be looking at venue implications and what are some implications of venue. You've already learned about one of those, and that is state court geography, right, and state court structure. So that's a general implication of venue, right? So in this particular critical element, you're talking about venue implications, generally speaking. Later on in Module 6, you'll learn about another implication of venue, and that's change of venue requests due to either, for example, excessive negative pretrial publicity in criminal cases, and you're going to be researching some cases. So you'll see how change of venue can apply to venue and the implications associated with where a trial is going to take place, right? So that's how we're connecting a lot of these dots that we've learned in Module 1 and Module 2, all right? So we're putting some of these concepts that we've learned, like jurisdiction and venue, and now we're applying them to our scenario. So it's important, one, that you read the scenario. Don't read too much into the scenario. It's just a basic little general fact pattern just to give us a place to start so we have an idea as to what's going on, all right? And then we're going to be going back and looking at some of our previous assignments and how can we apply those to areas of our milestone one, right? So that's what we're doing this week. And that's why learning about the courts and judges is coming to fruition now, and the idea of jurisdiction and venue. All right, so tips for the week: take a look at the announcements, look at my short module lecture, carefully review the assignment guidelines and grading rubric so that you make sure you address each of those critical elements. Now, another tip, because our final project has about 18 critical elements, so by the time you do milestone 1 and milestone 2, you will have completed 2/3 of your final project. The last third are going to be critical elements that were not part of milestone 1 or milestone 2, and I will talk about those later on in the course. All right, so you will have completed 2/3. So milestone 1 is 1/3 of your final project. So, excuse me. So if you wish, you can use headings and follow by your response, because remember, like I said, we have like 18 critical elements. So using your assignment guidelines as your outline is going to be very, very important, and that's a tip I want to give you. The other thing is, go ahead and use headings if you want. So for example, this week, if you look at the assignment guidelines and grading rubric, the first thing you're going to have to discuss is judicial systems hierarchical structure. So if you want to type in your paper, judicial system hierarchical structure, and then underneath that, post your response, that's perfect. And then next you would put judicial systems level, and then you would put your response underneath that. And then third, judicial system subject matter jurisdiction, and so forth. And I think you will find that that is an efficient and effective way to do this assignment and then carry it over to the final project, because like I said, the final project has like 18 critical elements. And so in the past, students have not included all of the critical elements. So it's important that you do that, right? So that's my other tip. Otherwise, I think overall, it's pretty straightforward in terms of what the expectations are for the milestone assignment. But if you have any questions during the week, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to steer you in the right direction or clear anything up. But again, I think it's important that you at least take a look at the short module lecture, the announcement, the resources that you've been provided, and I think they will help you as you prepare. Right, and then once you complete the milestone 1 assignment, and I provide you my feedback, then what you want to go back in as soon as you can is take a look at my feedback, add things, massage it, clean things up, and then you can set it aside until we get ready for the next milestone and then your final paper. And then it'll all come together rather smoothly, right? Take a look at the final grading rubric, which I will also post, so you have an idea, because in the final grading rubric, there is an exemplary rating. And so oftentimes that might require you to provide some specific and relevant evidence based on research, maybe some specific and relevant examples to highlight the concept, so I have an idea that you really know what it is that you're talking about, okay? And that you can clearly explain certain things to me to get that exemplary rating. All right, so I think that's it. Wishing you guys a great week. Again, if you ever have any questions or concerns, never hesitate to reach out, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. All right, guys, thanks a lot, and you guys are doing a great job, so keep up the good work. I appreciate everyone's hard work. Awesome. All right, guys, see you later. Bye.